The secret to test automation using visual testing, it might not be what you'd think. It's not just about taking screenshots, it's about catching bugs that your regular functional end-to-end tests would never catch. In this video, I'm going to show you how visual testing works, what can go wrong, and the tools that you can use. And if you want to level up your automation testing skills fast, then download my free guide, Top 5 Test Automation Best Practices. It's full of techniques I use every day on the job. The link is in the description. And by the way, there's one mistake that most teams make with visual testing. Stick around to hear what that is. What is visual testing? Let's start with what visual testing actually is, because if you think it's just screenshots, you're missing the power of visual testing. Visual testing is about catching UI changes that your end-to-end functional test would never catch. For instance, say the text of your button is "click me." Cool, and you have a test that says, hey, load the page, verify the button's there, verify the text says "click me," and then click it. Straightforward, right? What happens if suddenly the text is made so small no one can see it? Your test will still find the text and pass. What if the text is rendered upside down, or the whole button is rendered upside down? What if the button changes all the color, the background color and the foreground color, to black and no one can see any of the text? Your test is still going to pass because it still can find the text and it can still click the button and the button is there. Visual testing would catch those changes, whereas your functional test wouldn't, or at least wouldn't without you doing a lot of work to verify every single visual element possible, which would take you forever, would not be practical for testing at all. Yeah, you don't want to write that much code for every single test. At the end of the year, you would have 5 tests written and your manager would be looking to replace you. But that being said, visual testing can speed up your tests too. So if you have a ton of elements on your screen, instead of checking each one by one, which is what your functional test would have to do, you can just take one snapshot of the entire screen, and then you're golden. How it works is, you get a baseline image for a test and you name it something like, hey, here's the home page. So you have a test, it takes a snapshot, you name it homepage, and the next time you run that test, it's going to take another snapshot and it's going to compare it each time. If anything changes in that comparison, visually, it will alert you. And not only that, a lot of the cool tools out there like Percy or Applitools will highlight those differences. And this is how you can capture a whole bunch of failures that regular tests wouldn't. Okay, so stick around. In the next section, we're going to use Percy and do a small demonstration of using visual testing. Now, I'm going to show you a quick example of using visual testing. I'm going to use a tool called Percy that's owned by Browser Stack, and it does a cool snapshot thing. How Percy works, it doesn't take a screenshot like an image of the current browser. What it does is it takes your document object model, it uploads it to their servers, and then it renders on their servers across multiple browsers and across multiple viewpoints. So if you have a small viewpoint, which represents a mobile, or a large 4K monitor, or all the different ways your page can be rendered, then that's what it does. And you can set all those up, whether to do all the browsers, just one browser, whatever. But anyway, I'm going to jump into it and show it to you, just letting you know that it's not just a simple screen cap. It is actually uploading the document object model, and that's how they do it. So we're looking right here. This is Percy by Browser Stack. I did set up a tic-tac-toe project. So I'm not going to click into it right now because it there's nothing uploaded, so it just shows my API code, and I don't want to show you my API code. If you go here to the Get Help section, then it helps you setting up Percy for the first time and getting your API code, and gives you instructions on how to run it. For this example, I'm going to be using Playwright. Right here is the app I'm going to be testing against. I just made a simple tic-tac-toe app with React. And yeah, it's just XOXOXO. And right here, oh, there's a winner. And then you can do new game, it clears everything out. Very basic. That's what this app is. And I'm going to introduce some visual changes to show you what it looks like. But first, let's do the baseline image. So over here, I've installed Playwright and Percy. I've set up Percy's API key. So that maps to my API key. And you have to install the Percy CLI. So when you run this stuff, you're going to use this thing called Percy exec. And that is a command line tool that lets things know that it's running through Percy. So right now I'm going to not run it through Percy just so I can show you the test. If I just run Playwright by itself, UI, it's going to run these two tests. Let me show you what these two tests are. First one, it just goes to the home page, takes a Percy snapshot. And if you look up here, I just imported Percy snapshot from the library right there. Got the Percy snapshot and I'm naming it a homepage snapshot. And this page object is the DOM it's going to use to get all that document object model. In the second test, going to that the home page again. Then I'm going to iterate through and click through the squares until there's a winner. And that's what this should do right here. And then I'll take a snapshot. And this time I named it after clicking all the squares. So right now I'm going to run this with just Playwright, just so you can see it run. And I'm going to do it in the Playwright UI. And it's just very simplistic test. Let me just run these tests really quick. They're kind of brain dead, so don't expect much. Cool, so I wanted to demonstrate there. What just happened? It said the game, oh, there it is. It just didn't run. Sorry, I'm still getting used to Playwright. I don't use it at work, so it's only in my spare time that I've been using Playwright. Okay, here it goes. It's actually clicking all the squares, and then cool, we got a winner here with X. So notice this one did not run with Percy. So right here, you can even see it, Percy is not running, disabling snapshots. If you can see that little bit of text right there. There's probably some output in Visual Studio. Oh, there is not. Oh, never mind. So anyway, Percy is not running, so it's not collecting anything and it's not uploading anything when it does these Percy snapshots. It's basically what we call a no-op. Nothing happened, no operation. So let me kill this off and show you how to run it with Percy. And I'm going to do it without the UI. And the reason why is because until the thing exits, it doesn't stop the Percy session. So as long as that Playwright UI is open, it won't upload things to the cloud. So you'll never get the baseline image or the diffs. So now I'm going to run it with Percy. I have my token, all that put into the environment variable here. And let's see what happens. It's just going to run those tests I wrote above. Oh no, is it running multiple tests? Why did it run so many tests? It's weird. Did I do something wrong? So those tests ran. Now let's go to here. Let's see what's happening. Oh, here we go. We got a build. So we ran that, got a build, and we got 2 snapshots. 2 tests, 2 snapshots. And it is unreviewed. So we have to go in and look and see what we got here. So here's the homepage snapshot, was just nothing. And we have, this is the baseline, so we have nothing to compare it to right here. And here it is right here with all those X's filled in. Pretty rad, right? And if you look up here, so if you go up here, you see here is, we're looking at the Edge browser. We got Firefox, Chrome, Safari, and we also have 1280 width, and we have a 375 width, which kind of shows up what someone would see this on a phone, a responsive view, which is really important. So you can see, you get kind of double the testing here, or quadruple the testing with just one call. It tests against multiple browsers and multiple viewpoints, which is rad. You get to, otherwise you'd have to set everything yourself to like run tests multiple times against all these different types of devices and viewports. Sorry, not devices, browsers and viewports. Percy just does that for you, and it gives you a lot of coverage that you wouldn't normally get on your end-to-end tests. Not without quite a bit of work on your part. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to approve this build. It's like, hey, these look good. Now that I have these approved, if I run it again, then it'll compare against those snapshots. Let's just run the test again. Hopefully it is not trying to do any type of duplicate stuff here. Hopefully this is counting it as a new session. All right, so this is not doing it as a new session. So I think I need to do something different to get this to run as a new session. Okay. Here we go, and now let's go back to Percy. So we did actually get a new build. I don't know why it's thinking getting duplicate snapshots. Must be doing something wrong. All right, here we go. And you saw before it said no changes. See that? No changes. There are no diffs. That's good. That means you have a passing test. There's no diffs. You're very happy with that. Now let's introduce some visual changes. Okay, so now I changed all the text to white. So you can't see anything. See the text for this button, you can't see it. It's there. It still says the same thing. It's just not there. So if I click on here, you're not seeing the X's and O's, and there should be a winner at this point, and you can't see it right there. If I highlight it, you can kind of see everything. Oh, winner, X. So you can see right here, it's broken, but your test would not know it's broken because the text is there, everything's present, the buttons all work. Your test would completely pass this. Let's see what Percy says. Okay, here we go. Percy again, Playwright test. I feel like there should be a drum roll or some stupid crap happening. What's going on? What's going on? Oh, I think this thing is running the test multiple times in a row, and I don't know why. I think I need to figure that out. All right, test is finished. Everything should be uploading now. Let's see what Percy has to give us. All right, here we go. It's processing the snapshot. Wait for it to finish. There we go. We got 2 unreviewed. See, before it said no changes. So now it has definitely caught changes since there's unreviewed stuff. So let's click on that. So now we see right here, it's giving us the highlight right here. If I click on this, this is what's happening. And this is the difference. And it's highlighting things in red right here. It's like, oh, all of this stuff is different. And same for the home page test and for all the X's and O's test. There you go. It is definitely catching the bug. This is something the visual test would have caught that your functional test would not have caught. So what would you do with this build now? Well, this build sucks. You're not going to accept this. This isn't a passing build. You're going to reject the build, or you can delete it if it was just a practice test. Do it. So let me reject this build. Reason for rejecting the build, text is not visible. Confirm reject. I'm going to continue and I say, hey, this shit sucks. There we go. This shit sucks. Rejected. Boo. If we try to run that again, actually don't know what'll happen if we have a rejected build and there's been no changes on that build. One more time just to see what'll happen. No, I'm going a little bit overboard, but I'm always curious how this stuff works. But anyway, here's what I wanted. All right, so I did no changes. All right, so now we can see we're still having the same problem. And we can reject that build or leave comments, do whatever else here, but yeah, it did not update the baseline at all. So the baseline is still like, hey, there's something bad happening here. So until you fix that or update the baseline, and you update the baseline by clicking approve build, which we do not want to do in this instance. There you go. That's the basics of visual testing right there. And you can configure this however you want. Just because you don't have a passing build or this didn't work, it won't fail your tests. You can set it up to fail your tests if you really want to, but by default, it's not going to fail your test. You have to purposely set it up that way that if you get this difference from the baseline, all it'll do is update this cloud saying, hey, you need to review things. That's it. So just be aware of that on Percy, and I think quite a few other of these tools by default out of the box, unless you configure it, they won't fail the test. That's up to you. Instead, they'll just give you all the diffs, and then you can review them yourself and see if there's a bug or not. But as cool as this is, there can be problems. It'll bite you in the butt with visual testing. So let's get to that part. What's gonna bite you in the butt with visual testing? The problems with visual testing. So the example I gave you was a very, very simplistic app. Extremely simplistic. The problem happens when the elements on your page don't load quickly enough. That'll be one problem. So you'll take the snapshot, but your page isn't finished loading everything. So your snapshot will be different each time. So you get a lot of failures if you have indeterminate changes. So what you should do to help prevent that in your tests is always make sure you're waiting for all the visual elements to fully load before taking your Percy snapshot. So make sure they expect elements to be visible, expect text to be visible. Just put all the expects first, so Playwright or Cypress, whatever you're using, waits first. And that'll help stabilize that. Another really annoying problem is data changing, dynamic data that is something like a date. Dates change, so dates and times. So as you're running, like say if you ran something and established your baseline yesterday and that's the date it's on there, it's going to fail when you run it today because it's going to put a new date in there. How can you fix that? There's a couple ways. You can ignore that region with the date. Percy allows you to ignore certain areas of your app. Another thing you can do is just, instead of ignoring, you don't capture that thing with the image. You only capture the component on the page. So before I was doing a snapshot of the entire page. So instead, what you can do is just take a snapshot of an element on the page. For instance, I could only look at that tic-tac-toe board by itself. None of the buttons or the text above it or the buttons below it, just that. So if there was a date somewhere else on the page, it wouldn't affect my test. Other places where dynamic things can change, like your company has notifications. I always have like little banners that pop up that can throw off your test. A whole bunch of other little weird things can just throw off your test, like just this little tiny thing. I would say you should not be using visual testing fully on a live app. And let me clarify what I mean by that. I think you should be running visual testing only on the front end, and you should fake everything on the back end. Mock it out. So if you have the capability of doing that, mock everything out on the back end. I'm sure Playwright has an API. I'm not familiar enough with Playwright yet to know what API, but I did do a video on Cypress and mocking. I'm going to point here as if there is a card thing right here that says Cypress pointing to that video. I don't know if I can do that with cards or not, but if there is, that's the video I wrote for mocking with Cypress. So even if it is live, you can use the mocking stuff to mock out the dates. You can mock out any API, any data coming from the back end. You can mock it all out. So whether it is live, so like for instance at my company, we can't quite isolate the front end from the back end and build it separately. It's just not how we set things up. You can instead just go through, figure out all the APIs and just mock them. Hit all the endpoints. It's a bit of work, but once you do it once, you know how to do it for the rest of your app. And this will stabilize all the changes. So you don't have unknown changes coming from out of nowhere. You know the dates, you set the date on the page, you set all the data coming to the page. It's the same every single time you go to that page. That's very important. You don't want to see like dynamic changes that are part of your app. You want to see only the UI changes that someone has introduced. And you either accept those new UI changes or fail them if they're actually a bug. I hope that makes sense. So again, let me repeat some of these problems so far. First one is, things don't load all together at the same time. So you should wait for all the elements to be present on the page before you do a snapshot. 2, you want to, if you can, build the front end separately and mock everything on the back end. 3, if you can't do that, then still just mock everything, intercept things. Cypress.intercept is a cool function that lets you intercept all the APIs and then change the data that's sent to your app. Or another thing you can do, maybe you can set up a fake backend server. I don't know if that's even possible, and just seed it with a whole bunch of stuff, and who knows? There's things you can do. The point is to make it so the front end, the visual part, the UI is as stable as it possibly can be. 4, I would say don't snapshot everything. I think I mentioned it kind of briefly before, how to stabilize things when you just do the board, but I highly recommend you don't take a snapshot of your entire page. It's usually fine if you're in a small team and everyone, all 5 developers are just on your one team and are all working one app, and there's one UI developer. You're probably fine taking snapshots of the entire page. However, when you work in a larger company where there are multiple teams updating different parts of the UI, you can't control what these other teams are doing. So you don't want your test failing because someone updated the navigation bar, or someone did some cool little widgets on the side, or they updated the little helper chat box in the lower right-hand corner. You don't want your stuff failing over that. You want your stuff to fail over specifically what you're checking. So if I just wanted to check that tic-tac-toe game app and say like there was all this other corporate stuff around that and advertisements and whatever, I would just say, hey, just use the CSS selector for that. Instead of taking the page, just take the individual element. That'll help stabilize your test and make them more repeatable. And the final problem, and this is one I don't really have a solution for. It depends on your company, it depends on people, it depends. Anyway, the problem itself is that you're reviewing those changes and you're trying to tell if a change is on purpose or not. Because all the elements could have shifted over by like a little bit. That could have been on purpose from your developer. You don't know until you have to go ask them. Like, hey, is this what you wanted? Anyway, the developer could have done it, but the actual UI designer might not have intended it. So you need to talk to the UI designer. The UI designer usually is not part of the whole dev cycle here. They're probably not going to be using your Percy thing to approve or disallow changes. So getting that process in place at your company can be difficult. Usually it starts off with just you as the tester, looking at the differences and trying to make that call. That's where you start. Then you start bringing in the devs. Then you start bringing in the UI engineer. I mean, it depends on your company, depends on the size of your team. You might not even know who the UI team is. You just get these UI updates and you're like, what? Why did that change? Oh, the library team that's in Singapore decided to update this. I'm like, oh, okay. It happens. That can be a problem on how to figure out what's good and what's not good. And should you approve that build or reject it? That can be one of those conundrums, and you don't want to leave this stuff like being rejected over and over and over again for each test, because then you get back into that flaky test thing that I've mentioned in my top 5 test automation best practices thing you can download. I keep mentioning over and over again. Flaky tests. You don't want your test to be flaky. You want your test to be reliable. So if developers see a bunch of failed stuff all over the place, even if it is in this cloud, they won't trust it. They don't want to look at it. It's just too much noise. So you don't want noise. You want rock solid UI tests here. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so now that I talked about the failings, the drawbacks, the problems with visual testing, let me go back and talk about where visual testing really shines. Where visual testing shines. So we've already mentioned where visual testing really shines. That is things that your functional tests cannot capture. So let's say, like what the example we did where it changed everything to white on a white background means no one can read the text. Your text is still there, the buttons are still there, but your functional test will just pass. Only the visual test will detect that difference. And there's a lot of things that can happen. You can make a lot of mistakes with CSS. You can accidentally transform things so the text flips upside down or images upside down, or you can do the Z index wrong and everything's layered on top of each other. The positions of things are completely off. So the visual test can help you find that, whereas your functional tests just look for things in the DOM. So they are like, cool, it's in the DOM, it's good to go. So that's the first thing. We've already demonstrated where that where visual testing is really good for that. So the second thing that shows where visual testing really shines, this is from a personal experience I had. The developer at one company I worked at wanted to update one of the libraries. One of the libraries called Material UI was out of date. It was older. So we wanted to upgrade to the latest Material UI. And Material UI applies a lot of the theming of your website. So it gives a lot of the themes of how things are laid out and whatnot. We thought that just updating to the latest version wouldn't change the way our site, we thought it would be backwards compatible. We thought it would not change everything drastically. And when we did the upgrade, everything looked great. Everything looked good. However, the visual tests all failed. None of the functional tests. Functional tests were fine. Visual tests all failed. And it turned out like the new Material UI did a lot of subtle changes all throughout, which doesn't sound too bad, but actually our UX designer had a very specific vision in mind, and we tried to make that exactly how the UX developer envisioned our website. When Material UI did that update, or we did that Material UI update, it changed that vision. It shifted things around subtly. It changed fonts a little bit. It changed a lot of stuff. So we wouldn't have caught that in functional test. Visual test caught it. The second thing is that our front-end developer was then able to use those diffs in the tests and then take the new Material UI and change everything over so it matched the old. And then when all those tests started passing again, that's when he knew he got it right. So without those visual diffs, we wouldn't have known something was wrong. And two, we wouldn't have been able to fix it anywhere near as quickly because we wouldn't have had those baseline diffs to know what the website should have looked like. Because you can lose that in the mix pretty easily after a couple years of developing something. So yeah, that actually saved days, if not like a full month of our front-end developers' time fixing that stuff. So he was sold on it. Our team definitely put all the money into Percy after that, and we did not complain about the visual tests failing and whatnot. We was on board. It proved its value. And the final little nugget where visual testing shines is if you have a ton of stuff on a page and you need to test a lot of things at once, visual testing will do that easily. It'll just take that snapshot and do all the stuff. And that's your text. All the text things that you want to make sure look correct, have all the right error messages, all the right, UI text elements everywhere. It'll do it. Versus you trying to do that in a functional test, make sure at least even just the text. You have to go through each element, get the text of each element, and make sure each text and compare it and whatnot. So that's a ton of code you have to write to make it work. Versus one line of code for a visual test. One line. So that's amazing. Of course, we already discussed that in the previous section. The drawback for that is trying to use visual testing with a real life application can be difficult. So this might not help you with real data, real life stuff, unfortunately. But everything else, like especially error messages, it really helps out a lot. Now, finally, let's jump into some of the tools you can use for visual testing. Tools for visual testing. I'm going to mention a few tools here. First, the two major ones that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's a ton more, but the two major ones that I know of, the one we covered here is Percy, and then there's Applet tools. APPLITOOLS, not Apple tools, Apple tools. Yeah, my boss kept saying, Apple tools? Is that an Apple product? No. Apple tools. It used to be that Apple tools they started off just using AI. Before even AI was like super popular. They used AI to do the visual diffs. So what that means was you uploaded the document object model, it would render things, but it used AI to see if the differences are something the human eye would catch versus like one-off pixels, which your eye can't catch. So you won't get false positives or you won't get bad failures. I always use false positives wrong, or is it true positives? Or anyway, false negatives? Anyway, things that really don't make a difference, like it's one pixel off. Like if you just do a straight pixel to pixel comparison, But anyway, Apple Tools originally was just an AI tool that helped with that, so you wouldn't get those one-off things and wouldn't get like a difference between like Firefox and Chrome rendering things slightly differently. You wouldn't have that problem with Applet tools, but otherwise it operates almost exactly the same as Percy. Percy it used to not have the AI, but now it does include the AI, so I don't think there's really a huge difference between Applet tools and Percy. I think it'll just come down to your preference of their workflow, their UI, and also some of the other cool tools, or maybe there's like Percy is part of Browser Stack. So if you're using the Browser Stack infrastructure, it might be better for you. But otherwise, they're fairly similar. One I did not cover here is called Chromatic. Chromatic is a cool tool. Actually, it's part of a storybook Chromatic, and it's a different type of philosophy, and it's not something that we put directly into our end-to-end test like I was showing. That's why I didn't show it the way it was. But developers and UI engineers get together and they create things called storybooks, and these storybooks are renderings of the all the UI elements that you're using in your app. It takes the code and it just generates all the stuff on little pages. So it gives you a library that you can look at, and you can even upload to the storybook cloud, and you can see all the tools and all the little components that you need. And you write little storybook files that render them. And it's a little bit weird, but a lot of UI design goes on that way. So that way the UI designer and the front-end developer usually discuss things and communicate using Chromatic and actually not Chromatic, Storybook. Chromatic is a testing tool for Storybook. It's a visual testing tool. So all those Storybook files you wrote that render those individual components, you can feed them into Chromatic, and Chromatic will compare them on each build. So it's like the visual testing with us, but it's kind of done in the background. If you have a Storybook, it'll happen automatically with Chromatic, and that lets you see all the differences you have just on a component level. Very helpful, extremely helpful. I've used that before to not only do those visual comparisons, which it really is nice to see like just one individual tool get updated in a certain way. That's definitely helped developers I've seen like, oh, that's how that works. As a tester, I can at least see that a component changed. That's always helpful as well. Just to know that something changed, let you go and look at it a little bit more to see, did something screw up there? But another cool thing about having these Storybook stuff is that it can give you additional code coverage you weren't planning. I can make that into a whole separate video. You can actually set up a lot of these tools to like give you code coverage. I actually had all the visual stuff plus Chromatic render all these things and give me a ton of code coverage for the front end. And finally, I would be totally not doing my job if I couldn't say you can do this without using a paid service as well. I am not going to demonstrate that because it's a bit of work, but you can totally do your own snapshots. I think every single testing framework out there has a way of rendering a snapshot of the web page. So Playwright, Selenium, Cypress all have ways to do those snapshots, and I think they even have little things where you can compare snapshots. Problem is, it's not in that cloud. Remember how I was talking before, like Applitools and Percy take the document object model and then upload it to their servers and then render it? There's a reason for that. Anything you do can throw off that baseline image. So if you run it on your machine, the way your machine rendered things and it could be different than how it's being rendered in the cloud. So you'll run it on your machine and it'll give you all these images, but then if you check those images in to use as your snapshot baselines, and then the developer goes and runs it on their machine, suddenly everything fails, and you're like, why? Everything needs to be perfectly the same in the environments for you to run these snapshot tests. So you would need something like Docker set up. Docker would ensure that you have the same environment, and then you would render these. But even just doing a pixel-to-pixel test, you don't want to do that either. The pixel-to-pixel comparison often fails. So you need to use some type of image comparison tool that gives you a little bit of fuzziness. And there are tools out there, and they're pretty easy to use. So there are tools to do these type of image comparisons, and these tools even will show you diffs as well. But you have to write all that code. You have to store everything in somewhere, and you probably don't want to store it in your source or your GitHub or whatnot, because that'll bloat out the size of your GitHub. You don't want to put in a whole bunch of binary files in your GitHub. So you need some type of storage. Either it's AWS or you're getting some type of CDNA, something. But yeah, you'll need to fill out that infrastructure yourself, and you're not going to be using as sophisticated of tooling. But hell, all the stuff with LLMs and whatnot, you could probably build out something for yourself and get it working. So if you don't want to pay that money to Applitools and Percy, you have other solutions. It's just going to take a while for you to build it. I'm just saying, be careful how you run it, because it all has to run in exactly the same environment with the same settings in order to give the same visual look and feel that you're comparing against. Yeah, sorry, to do that on my own here, that'd be a lot more work than I'm willing to do for this video. But let me know in the comments if you would like me to build a non-cloud based version of this and demo it. I'm not going to guarantee I'll do it because it's a bit of work, but it's a challenge I'd love to try. So, but anyway, it's up to you how you want to go about this and what you want to build out. Percy's great because it just lets you start for free. If you want to build it up and start doing like a couple of snapshots, Percy, I think, is where I would go to start. And remember that huge mistake I teased about earlier. The huge mistake is teams not implementing visual testing tools and not taking them seriously and not reviewing them. Those are the big mistakes teams make here. So pick your tool, make sure your team agrees on the tooling that you're using and how these snapshots are going to be reviewed, and keep everyone in your team in the loop on these visual tests. If they don't know what's happening and they don't know there's these failures going, they don't know all the coolness that you implemented and the stuff, all the tools they have available to make their job developing easier. So now that you know the secret to test automation using visual testing, you can see that it's a different tool to complement your functional tests. It's not meant to replace your functional tests. Honestly, I would argue it's not even meant to be used at the same time as your functional tests, because you'd like to mock out that backend. So you probably don't want all the real backend data. However, for UI development, it is amazing. And I love visual testing. It does take discipline. It does take work. So it's not something you just drop in, do that one Percy snapshot and have it work. It takes some effort. It takes some coordination with other team members, and it takes visibility to even justify the expense of using these tools. But I think in the long run, having this is amazing and will help you out more than hinder. But I want to hear from you. Have you used any of these visual tools? Have you used something different? Like ChatGPT was telling me there's a tool called Loki. I have no idea what that is. But it's another visual testing tool. I'm sure there's a few others out there. I know all the AI stuff happening nowadays, I'm sure there's a ton of visual testing type of coolness out there. So if there's something cool that I didn't discuss here, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. I'm sure everybody else would too. So drop that in the comments because we'd love to hear it. How about any other experiences you had with visual testing? Have you run into any problems that I didn't discuss here? Please drop a line. Do you think I'm full of it? Full of crap? Drop a line. Let me know. And if you haven't already, please download the guide, Top 5 Test Automation Best Practices. I discuss things like flaky tests. I discuss things about quite a few things that I use daily in my career. It's just a short 5-page thing. It's really easy to read and get through, and you can start putting things into effect today in your job. Again, I'm a senior test automation engineer. I've been doing this stuff for over 20 years. And I just distill like some core nuggets of knowledge in that little PDF. So download that below. Check the description. Now that you know the secret to test automation using visual testing, maybe you're thinking about the secret to test automation using GitHub Copilot. Oh, you're in luck. Because if you click right here, you check out this video. This is about GitHub Copilot. Yeah, if you pair with what you just learned with this video, it's gonna be so much more powerful. You're gonna rock it in your day job, only job, night job. I don't know when you work. But anyway, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you all watching. Till then, next week or so, happy testing.